Greg Soulje, meteorologist Greg Soulje, I should say. Welcome.
Oh, you could just call me Greg.
I can just call you Greg. Perfect.
Forget the formalities and the titles once in a while.
We talk all the time. So
or weather
welcome,
guy.
welcome, Greg, weather guy.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds
Welcome.
like we've got a few things happening this week. Looking towards Thursday and Friday. So let's make sure we talk about more rain. It sounds like more severe storms, perhaps.
Yeah, that too, and just it's going to be one of these kind of told you so type of things going forward. But we'll elaborate that here a little bit later on. But let's get to it here and talk about what's been kind of a cold, still late winter feel for some areas of the upper Midwest, the northern Corn Belt. There continues to be a little snow flying into upper Michigan, northern Wisconsin, northern lower Michigan this morning. It's a 40-mile-an-hour wind racing through parts of central Illinois, and that's going to kick up fire potential, by the way, for the day today. And a few sprinkles still coming on down as far south as about Indianapolis. But a cold morning across, especially the eastern Corn Belt for the day today. But at least it's a dry day, and we're continuing to track the flow of the rivers out of the Ohio into the lower Mississippi. It's Cairo, Illinois. I don't know how you say it correctly. But in any event, the crest is settling in there. That's almost 13 feet above average, or at least above flood stage. And that's the highest it's been since March of 2019. A couple of days ago, it was in south central Indiana and about 20 feet above flood stage there. So down it goes into the lower Mississippi Valley. We're not done with this kind of stuff, Sarah, so we'll talk about that in just a second. So that's the headlines across at least the eastern Corn Belt. Good freeze all the way in through Nebraska, western Iowa. That frost and freeze, there are advisories up in effect for central Illinois, Indiana, and parts of western Ohio over the next couple of days. Probably 28 to 33 for an hour or two tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning in some of those areas. That's kind of the leftover draining and runoff, if you will, from the rains of the past couple of weeks. Again, at Cairo, Illinois, making its way down into Arkansas, the lower Mississippi Valley. So wonder if that'll impact barge traffic there. At least it's, there's been an ending of any significant dryness and drought in that particular area, but those fields in those Mississippi Valley Delta locales and deep southern states, he tries to say, are very much wet. Meanwhile, the plains that we talked about, freeze this morning all the way into the high plains of Kansas. 70-degree weather, though, expected to recover as far north as Montana. And so there's a quick turnaround in temperatures, and you get that big range and that big turnaround. There's wind involved at this point in the springtime calendar. So there may be some increased fire concerns out there with that dry, tender vegetation. 7% of the wheat crop beginning to head into parts of Kansas. Still a little bit early for it, even with the heat they've had out there of late. But despite recent moisture, and we've had some big improvement to the dryness and drought in Kansas and Oklahoma and point southward, those eastern areas, it's really the western half, the western plains, that continues to hurt. 40% of the crop there, poor and very poor as of the mid-stretch of April, especially centered in Nebraska, as well as South Dakota. Southern states, as mentioned, very wet and across the mid-south. Topsoil moisture levels there at 30 to 75% plus. Or surplus, we should say. And the wettest is in through Kentucky. No surprise there. Second, Arkansas. Third, Tennessee. And again, folks, we're not done with that stuff in that particular part of the country and points northward here in the coming weeks, plural. Anyway, western states, warm, dry weather pattern continues on. Of course, when you get that warmth early in the season here in tax day, mid-April, it sparks the runoff. The snow melt season gets underway, and you don't want that to come down and melt down very quickly or early in the season. Then your tap of water, if you will, and the reservoir breakout continues to struggle, not only in the Pacific Northwest, but it'll be more so into the southwestern states as we get deeper on into summertime. And it's for that reason you can see the drought monitor from last week. No big surprise. We will continue to bring this up, and I have a pretty good case that we're going to eradicate. There's some folks that are still on board. No, we're not going to break the drought at all here, especially in the eastern Corn Belt. Think we're going to break it big time. Probably too much of a good thing. And improvement, too, in those western Corn Belt areas and even parts of the plains here, although I think we'll go back in the other direction later on this spring and summertime in those areas back west of the Missouri. There's the weather maps for a Tuesday afternoon. Those lines coming out of eastern Canada through the Lakes region all the way to the eastern states, the more tightly they're compressed. Those isobars, they mean wind, and there'll be some 30-plus mile-an-hour gusts east of the Mississippi. Winds will be dropping off, and skies are beginning to clear west of the Mississippi and roughly southwest of a Quincy to maybe Evansville line, and so they'll get some sunshine there as the afternoon wears on. And those south winds are picking up again across the high plains areas. The only real significant moisture, some of that is actually lake-induced moisture. Northern lakes areas, there's some snow there, and rain through Ohio, Pennsylvania, and into New York State. By later tonight, high pressure settles into the good part of the western Corn Belt, eastern sections on the overnight through tomorrow morning. And so 28 to 32, probably Quincy, Springfield, Champaign, Crawfordsville, Indiana, Indianapolis, all the way down to maybe about west of Columbus line there tomorrow morning. Probably some mid-20s into northern Illinois and low to mid-20s through Wisconsin. So another good frost and freeze across a good part of the northern half of the Corn Belt. And there's a warm front, that little red hatched line, if you will, that comes out of the Dakotas, spreads into central Illinois. That's a warm front. And winds turn south. We begin to bubble up some moisture from the Gulf. There's a couple of upper little ripples, and that is the next in a string of systems. About every possible way outside of maybe daytime heating, we're going to be able to manufacture rain over the plains and Corn Belt locales here in the coming weeks. Again, plural, he said. And by the time we get to tomorrow or Thursday morning, that warm front gets pretty active. Low-level jet picks up during Wednesday night. That brings Gulf moisture and warmth northward on the overnight hours, overruns the cool air mass, and you get these showers and thunderstorms, what we call in the weather business, if you want to sound cool at the coffee shop. Elevated convection, that's the stuff you'll see in Iowa and the mid-Mississippi Valley. Rains across the northern plains, Red River Valley of the north, and more snow. Heads up, folks out there in the casinos and the Black Hills and points westward through Big Sky Country. Relatively high snow levels. Nonetheless, it's going to be a mid-April snow, but welcome moisture in those western states. And already charting severe weather potential, at least a slight risk. That would be category 2 out of 5. So just a slight risk for a couple of isolated storms, where those severe weather areas will be expanding and probably get upgraded with time to enhanced and moderate as we move through the next 5 to 10 days. And probably the bulk of this is going to be centered over the Easter holiday weekend. And there is the first of probably many headline charts and or stuff that gets tossed out on social media without any rhyme or reason. But it kind of continues, at least opens up the thinking that we have been talking about, that we are in line for a wet spring. It's just 7 days here we're talking about, but a snapshot, and just with time, continue to build that to the north and east in favor of a good part of the Corn Belt, especially east of the Mississippi. Those shaded areas of red, 3 to 4 inches. And just north of where we've had the worst rain the past couple of weeks, more rain as we continue to water, or at least get the water to drain down out of the southern and eastern Corn Belt. And there'll be organized rain and some snow, too, into the upper Midwest, but largely rain. That will help with the dryness and drought situation where we haven't had really significant improvement, i.e. Minnesota, the upper Midwest, parts of the Dakotas. And you can see still some snow across the Rocky Mountain states there. So a lot of the country, that's over the next 7 days. And so the headlines go like this: cold weather across the Corn Belt for the next couple, Sarah. Gusty winds in the plains. Nice warm up, but don't be getting fire things going out there. And the initial round, the next 5 days, is 1 to 3 in those same shaded areas from central Texas into the Ozarks, maybe the mouth of the Ohio River area over the next 5 days. And that's just the beginning, the startup and ramping up of all this. Here's the upper air charts as we move through the next 5 days: Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And really the emphasis here, you can see a little low coming out of the southwest. It opens up, moves into the Midwest and the Corn Belt locales between Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. That's the severe weather end of it, and maybe a heavy rainfall prospect there. That wiggle or trough moves to the Great Lakes region. Then there's another one Tuesday into the Pacific Northwest, and everything's kind of lined up from southwest to northeast. Not a lot of tap of cold air, so temperatures will stay mild or milder for some, back to above, maybe even much above to maybe a little above, but we're kind of trying to get out of this colder scenario for now. And then the next 5 days of the weather maps and charts, you can clearly see a web of pressure lines in that Friday chart. That's a 30-mile-an-hour south wind, a 40-mile-an-hour north wind, the rain changing to snow across the Dakotas, the upper Midwest. Showers and thunderstorms, probably heavy, probably severe. And that front showing signs. You can see a cold front moving through the Midwest. It stalls out roughly at the Ohio. There's a new low into Oklahoma, winds up through the upper Mississippi Valley. That boundary is still kind of stuck somewhere at the Ohio to the Ozarks. And there is a weather map that you could probably print and put out for the next 4 to 6 weeks. A boundary moves north, it moves south, disturbances track along it, you make rain. You warm it up, you make rain. You cool it off, you're going to make rain. And some of the northern branch jet stream areas, still some late season snow up near the Canadian border, the Northern Lakes region, Northern Rockies. The only really area of the country that probably tends drier would be in the western states. Wrong part of the country that we want to see that. This is the 6 to 10 day outlook from the feds. No endorsement, graphical purposes. But again, it's kind of what we've been talking about here on our get-togethers here and on This Week in Agribusiness and on radio as well. Be ready for a wet spring. It's not going to be easy. The windows of opportunity are going to be small, short-lived, a day or two when you need 3 to 5 to get things firmed up and ready to go. Yes, and I know we've made progress in planning over the past 30 years from when I broke into the weather business, but it's a wet scenario, slow drying days, limited sun. A breeze would be nice once in a while, but this is pretty much the story. Just keep rubber stamping this. You'll oscillate, this corridor of wet weather in this above area that's into the southern plains. You could easily put it in the Midwest. You could easily put it in the Western Corn Belt. In any event, it's that corridor from east of the Divide to the Ohio that we're looking at a wet weather pattern, to say the least. Cool thing I found at the Storm Prediction Center. No, this was the Climate Prediction Center. They come out with an experimental 3 to 4 week outlook. Competition, I guess, for me on This Week in Agribusiness. In any event, it lines up with what we've been talking about. We've been talking about it since January. We did the New Year's show and did a spring outlook, and on these broadcasts as well about, it's not going to be the greatest, not going to be a piece of cake this year. But this is their outlook through the first 9 days of May. We ought to be hitting it, full tilt out there with planting operations. Now, there's drought improvement, there is pasture land rejuvenation, winter wheat help, et cetera, so forth and so on. But you can easily just, push this thing to the Ohio, this green area. You could put that more above somewhere in the Great Lakes or the central and eastern Corn Belt locales, splitting hairs this far out, but it's the general right idea. Problems in the West, quick runoff there, and a little more dry time would be appreciated in the southeastern states, but we're not done with dryness and drought in that mid-Atlantic area of the country. And just for giggles here, at least some warmer days are coming. No real cold air in sight. Any cooling would be in the Pacific Northwest. So we get some warmth into the soils, but wet soils are a lot slower to warm than dry soils. And there's the Fed's 3 to 4 week outlook through early May. What's interesting here, and we talk about once in a while, and it drives Mike Pearson crazy. You talk about this retrogression of the weather pattern. I tell him, yeah, Mike, but the weather can actually back up. And it does, at least in the upper air sense. And things do back up to the west. And so you can see some of the warmth that was over the eastern parts of the country, the deep south. One piece of it, we think, and I think that's the hot ridge, the summertime ridge, establishing itself in the southwest and the southeastern sections of the country. Some warmth there. And there is a tendency to return to more normal weather temperature-wise into the Northern Lakes region. A lot of explanation of this map, but from a forecaster standpoint, and this is kind of what it kind of confirms what we've been thinking, that there'll be this cold of low, cold air, Sarah, that holds up through the Great Lakes region. Warmth over the western part of the country. Disturbances like to propagate along that boundary, and that's the way you're going to make rain. And it's tough to shut it off. Wet grounds beget a wet weather pattern. Dry grounds beget a dry weather pattern. And I think we're going to be actually looking at too much of a good thing in the Corn Belt and enough to probably categorically end the drought in some areas of the central and southern plains, and even more so in the Corn Belt areas going forward. So, Sarah, that's pretty much the story here in the coming days for the rest of this week. Again, we'll have the updated spring outlook, and we probably let the cat out of the bag already, what we're going to be kicking around, but maybe a little more insight to the summertime weather pattern coming up tomorrow, 1:00, our podcast. And of course, each weekend on This Week in Agribusiness and a bunch of radio stations as well across the country. So that's it from the weather office. Not good news. Remember, I'm only the forecaster, not the maker of this stuff.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? But yeah, tune in tomorrow, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, for a live discussion with Greg about the spring outlook and beyond. You usually take us, few months out.
Yeah.
So we'll
Yeah.
take a look at what we're talking about from a wet spring to maybe a dry summer, and all of those things and what that might mean for you in terms of your crops or your livestock or whatever it is that you're dealing with out there.
Yeah,
So
I think that D word after, you know, some welcome rains, and typically the rule of thumb, if you can't get anything organized in the rainfall department after, you know, before May 1, then it's tough to get organized rains in the plains anytime after that. So I think we've got some good news from pasture land standpoint, winter wheat, watering requirements for livestock, but it's just going to be too much of a good thing initially over many Corn Belt locales, but I think a more favorable setup in the western sections. And it may be a very wet spring top to bottom, and then a struggle to get improvement, and then just basically turn the switch off on the rainfall department in the eastern Corn Belt as we get deeper into summertime. But we'll kind of clarify all that when we get together on Wednesday.
All right. We'll see you tomorrow, Greg, and we hope to see all of you as well.
Take care.